something you're doing must be fundamentally different than just someone coming and auditing our books.
When you think of audit, you think of either it's there or it's not. And then
Absolutely.
all the no's are bad, right? It's like, oh my God, we got 15 no's. Well, that doesn't happen with accreditation.
When we enter an organization, we really want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we're going to teach you to celebrate the good, because human service organizations are notoriously bad at that, because we tend to go from one fire to the next.
Yeah, so this is bringing up a series of probably dumb questions, but I'm just going to ask him anyway. Is it possible to fail the accreditation? Let's start with that one. Hello, and welcome to IDD Leader, where each week I help you kick staff turnover to the curb and build the kind of workplace that attracts and retains the best people in human services. I'm your host, Nate Beers. Let's dive in. I've got a question, and I want you to sit with it for a moment. When's the last time you came through a compliance process and felt energized? Yeah, that's not the word that most people have when they've just come through a compliance process. In fact, for most people, anything that relates to compliance, accreditation, audits, it's sort of like the equivalent of going to the DMV, except you have to take your entire staff with you there. So about a year ago, I started noticing that a disproportionate number of the high-performing organizations that I was interviewing on this podcast were, in fact, CQL accredited. So I would ask them about it, and they would say things like transformational. And at that point, I realized I need to figure out what is going on here. Well, today, I'm so excited. This is part one of my conversation with top leaders from the Council on Quality and Leadership. I've got Mary Kay Rizzolo, I've got Katherine Dunbar, and Courtney Chapman. And in this conversation, we're going to dig into what accreditation with CQL actually looks like, why it feels nothing like an audit, what happens to organizational culture when they go through one of these, and why DSPs at one organization ended up wearing buttons that said, "Ask me about outcomes." Without further ado, let's get into it. I've interviewed a lot of guests that are positive outliers, leaders of organizations that are doing really well in the human services space. And I started noticing a pattern, which was a disproportionate number of them were CQL accredited. And then a lot of times I'd ask them about this, not necessarily even on the recording, but just on the side. And I wasn't hearing things like, oh, yeah, we just had to do that because our state required it. They would often talk about how it was a transformational process for their organization. That piqued my interest, so I've been very excited to have you guys on as guests. But let's just jump right in. I want to hear from you. What changes inside an organization when they go through the accreditation process with CQL? And not just on paper, but in the way that people work, the way that leaders lead, the way that staff feel about showing up to work every day.
I love this question. I think the biggest thing that we see is culture shift. You know, the entire organization is fully engaged in the accreditation process. There's this big culture shift to organizations becoming more inclusive. They have a greater sense of belonging. They're listening. They're self-reflective. I mean, I could go on for a day about all the things that they do. But I think one of the biggest transformations that we see is that culture shift. And then the way they look at themselves, the way they are working with other organizations, I think is a really big transformational experience for the organization. I also think that they start to realize how accreditation or just improving quality organization really impacts people. You know, how it impacts people receiving services, how it impacts families, how it impacts staff, especially, you know, how it impacts leadership and the way the organization communicates, and, you know, how they start talking more openly about what they want for the organization. And then I think one other thing, and, you know, Courtney and Mary Kay, feel free to hop in, is we focus part of the accreditation a good chunk of the accreditation on data and what that data is telling an organization, and then how to use that data to continuously improve the organization. So I think that's another impact that it can have on an organization too.
Mhm. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Kate, when you were talking about having them understand the why. That we don't just want to focus on a checklist or a list of things that you need to have in place. When we go in and we work with an organization on their accreditation, we are looking to see if they have those systems and in place. Do they have policies and procedures? But then we're also talking to people. We're doing focus
Mhm.
groups. We're talking to people receiving services, and we're talking to DSPs and frontline supervisors to see, do they know about the policy or the procedure, and is it actually happening on the ground? And I think, when they understand the why behind, oh, we have to fill out this documentation, or why do we have to do all of these procedures, when you can tie it to it's ultimately impacting somebody's quality of life. And that's why the work that you do is so essential.
Hmm.
Yeah, that why is really important too. You've got to be able to, people are more apt to do something if they know why they have to do it. And that's beyond ticking a box. I think that's a big piece too. It's just,
Yeah.
you're not just checking boxes.
And helping people understand the purpose, that why, uh, usually leads to more buy-in from folks because if once they understand, they're like, okay, yeah, we're on board with this,
And get it.
so that's
Mhm.
key too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful point. And I think that knowing why for most of us, it makes a world of difference. It really does. So I can't wait. We're going to circle back to a couple of things that you were highlighting a minute ago there, Kate. But before we go any further, I do want to give a chance for each of the three of you to introduce yourselves. Maybe just briefly state what your role there is. Maybe also say what CQL stands for in case someone might not be familiar. And then we could take a moment where from each of you, if you'd like to share. I'd love to know a moment that you realized like this is the right fit for me, being in this role and intersecting, human service agencies around quality improvement, these kinds of things. When it like you knew you're in the right spot.
Well, I'll start. My name is Mary Kay Rizzolo, and I am from CQL, which stands for the Council on Quality and Leadership. And I am the president and CEO, and I've been there for 10 years. And I knew that I loved CQL and the work they were doing from the moment I got there. I've been working in the field. I started off working with older adults and then moved over to developmental disability services back in the early 90s and was a frontline supervisor. And so I don't know, that's kind of hard. One kind of aha moment. I think I've just seen over my 10 years with CQL just different ways that organizations provide good services, how they're doing it right. And when I started at CQL, there was a story. I started like 10 years ago. There was this story that I heard about an organization that was going through accreditation, and the accreditation team went to the organization and they were doing their first day kind of presentation, telling people what was going on. And they said that the DSPs and the frontline supervisors, they were just not on board. They were kind of like looking at them like, do you know how much work we have to do when you're making us sit and go through an accreditation? But after they explained to them the why, which is kind of interesting, then by the end of the week, they were wearing these buttons that said, ask me about outcomes, because they had made the kind of click, the connection between the work that we're doing is impacting people's lives. And if we can find out what their, preferred outcomes are and provide those services, we're making a difference in people's lives. So I loved that story. Wanted to get one of those buttons.
That's great.
So I'll go next. I'm Katherine Dunbar. Most people call me Kate, and I am the Vice President of Services and Systems Excellence. So I oversee accreditation, among other things, but accreditation's my main role. And I too have been with CQL for 10 years. I started right before Mary Kay did, not by very long. So um, I think for me, so I started as a DSP in college, and then I had no idea I would spend the rest of my career in the disability field, but obviously I love it. It's just a great field to be in. But I worked for an organization that was accredited by CQL. And I think that's where my love of it started. And just to really see that organizational shift within my own organization was really impactful. And then to be able to use all of the experience that I've had, and I continue to do accreditation work. And it's the most favorite part of my job, really, is going to organizations and talking to them and learning from them. I think that's so important, that we continue to learn and grow from organizations. So I think that's probably the kind of the aha thing for me too.
Hmm.
Personal outcome measure interviews. There's just a lot to be said for those. I remember learning to do those at the beginning and just, yeah, a lot of interesting things come from those. So yeah.
Hmm.
Courtney.
All right, I'm Courtney Kelly Chapman. I'm the Vice President of Training and Special Projects. So I work with states and contracts with states, training, all things training related, webinars, those type of things. Absolutely love what I do. I've been with CQL, I believe it will be 3 years in June. I started at the end of June. I think it was 3 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. So how I got involved with CQL, I worked for the state of Tennessee prior to coming to CQL. And in 2012, I will never forget it. I was sitting in my office working, just kind of minding my business. And at that time, the deputy commissioner came down to my office and said, Courtney, we're going to do CQL. We're going to get the state accredited, and you're going to help lead the work. So I need you to go to this workshop next week. It was just that. And I said, what I'm going to say? No. I was like, okay. So I had no idea. I didn't know anything about CQL. And I said, okay. And that next week I went, and it was a personal outcome measures workshop. And I went to the workshop, and day one of the class, I was like, what, huh? It was kind of like, what is this? What? Okay. But the end of day one, we went out and did one-on-one interviews with people supported. We were at a day program in Nashville, Tennessee. And I had the best conversation with a young lady receiving services. And after that, I was hooked. I saw what we learned just from that conversation, the information gathering. And so from then on, the rest is history. And I'm fortunate to be working for CQL now. This is home. So yeah, it's been a great journey.
That's wonderful. I see and I feel the excitement that you guys have in your roles. But let me just kind of state the obvious here. I didn't actually know people could be this excited about accreditation. I mean, I'm going to just be perfectly honest. Most of the time when I'm in conversations with people, just across the board, it's lumped, it's sort of like go to the dentist, get audited, and then accredited is like, I'll give it this. It's a notch above both of those. It's just slightly above an audit or the dentist. But it's somewhere like, that this is kind of what I feel like the general vibe around accreditation. But you guys, I feel like you sort of flipped that script on its head.
Oh, yeah.
So something you're doing must be fundamentally different than just someone coming and auditing our books. If I'm an executive or a leader at an organization, can you, in a nutshell, just start to describe a little bit of what feels different?
One of the things that we do that I absolutely love, because when you think of audit, you think of either it's there or it's not. And then all
Absolutely.
the no's are bad, right? It's like, oh my God, we got 15 no's. Well, that doesn't happen with accreditation. It's called opportunities, which I love that, because that's space for you to grow. That's space for you to look at things differently. So I think just a tone that's set from day one, we're not in here to be like, oh, you got a yes here and a no here. It's an opportunity. It may not be there. And guess what? It's okay. It's not the end of the world. You can build on it. So I think that puts people at ease. When you realize, okay, we can do this, it changes that mindset.
Yeah. And I think we're very focused on being a strengths-based organization. that we really embrace that whole notion of appreciative inquiry, where we go into an organization and we like to find what they're doing well. And every organization is doing something great that we want to learn about, because they don't just learn from us, we learn from them also. And so we like to kind of find those nuggets of excellence and then build upon those. So we're not focused on finding things that aren't going well so much as highlighting, wow, you're doing a great job at this. Or are there any lessons learned here that we could apply to another part of your organization to make you even better?
What I'm really hearing you guys say is there's a lot of collaboration involved with this process. Why don't you flesh that out just a little bit of what does that look like for someone that's on the ground, or that's someone that's a leader at an organization? How are they experiencing that?
So our approach is very collaborative. We want to engage with an organization from the perspective of a partnership, and that we're in this together. We're here to support you. You're here to, when we enter an organization, we really want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we're going to teach you to celebrate the good, because human service organizations are notoriously bad at that, because we tend to go from one, fire to the next. So I think a lot of it is because we want this to be a partnership, and we want you to, like Mary Kay was talking earlier about appreciative inquiry. It's really about using the things that are going well at an organization to help, those places in the organization that maybe need some support, to do better, to learn from the other parts of the organization. And I think for very large organizations, that um, kind of collaborative partnership approach is really good, because they learn from other parts of the organization. It's not just what they're doing in one particular part of an organization, but the whole thing. And so they're learning from each other too. I think we really just kind of really value that with organizations. And
Yeah. And I think we also, eh, when we go and we do the accreditation visit, we're obviously there with the organization for that week. But then when we leave, we're still available. So if they have a plan that they're working on, they can work with us on those issues. And we like to share resources. We like to highlight what they're doing well. We have like accreditation success stories that we share. We like to connect them to other organizations that maybe have gone through something similar or have found good ways of doing things, so that they can do kind of that peer to peer learning. And then we don't go and do the visit and then come back 3 or 4 years later. We check in along the way. So we have those kind of mid cycle visits where I think it's effective for for us in our own accreditation, that if somebody's checking in on you, if you're supposed to be doing something and you're being held accountable, you're more likely to actually do it if you have to report to somebody, oh, this is what we've accomplished so far. So we like to do that to kind of keep that momentum going so that they don't lose that after the first visit.
Yeah, so this is bringing up a series of probably dumb questions, but I'm just going to ask him anyway. Is it possible to fail the accreditation? Let's start with that one.
yes, it is. I mean, even though we meet
Yes.
organizations where they're at, and this is a question we get all the time, um, there are things that we just can't, we can't accredit you if you're doing something very egregious. I mean, if you're abusing or neglecting people, or if you just it does have to be pretty egregious. There's If you're not interested in the partnership, if you're not forthcoming with us, that would certainly jeopardize being accredited. If, you are, you have a whole service line that you just don't want us to know about, and we find out, and, that's definitely that's not a good thing. Don't hide things from us. We want to help you. We're there to support you. So, um, it, we rely on organizations, to be transparent, and we do want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly, so, but yeah, there are definitely ways to fail, but there's no grade, so um, if there are certain things that you don't have in place, we want to see progress. Okay. We want to make sure that you're getting those things, in alignment. We also, there, I guess the basic answer is yes, you can, but it has to be pretty egregious.
And we only partner with organizations that share our values. So during the kind of planning call and before we engage with them and go and do the visit, we make sure that they share our values. And so we want to see that they're committed to improving the supports that they provide, that they are committed to supporting people to make choices and the be in the driver's seat of their own life. So
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, that's pretty basic. So are there levels then? Again, I don't know if these are good questions or not. Are there levels of accreditation? So if an organization, let's suppose that
different types.
we'll give a
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt. Let's suppose it's more of a startup situation.
Yes.
And so they've grown a little faster than some of their quality measures have been able to keep up, or it's not necessarily that they're doing bad work or not, it's not the egregious stuff. It's like, well, we didn't really build that out yet, like, so some of their SOPs aren't even there yet. I could easily picture a scenario where that's kind of like a happy scenario that someone maybe doesn't get a credit, or maybe they just get the basic level. So are there levels, or how would that work?
So there are different types of accreditation. There are certain, and they build on each other. So the, if you want me to describe all the types, I'm happy to do so. But we work with organizations that have not started serving people yet. So we're just looking at their policies, procedures, trainings, assessments, kind of the paper pieces of an organization. That's one type of accreditation. And then another type of accreditation is quality assurances, which is it's a 3-year accreditation, where we're looking at our foundational tools with the basic assurances. We're introducing shared values. We're introducing the personal outcome measures. That's a 3-year accreditation. And then we have person-centered excellence, which builds upon those tools. The organization has to be using the personal outcome measures, and have to be building upon those shared values. And then we have person-centered excellence with distinction, and this, that involves a lot more. They're building on the personal outcome measures, the basic assurances, the shared values, but also community values. We look at those. We look at advocacy. We look at what organizations are, kind of the impact that they have on their community, how they're, giving back to their community. And we're looking at person-centered planning, and it's a lot more involved than a quality assurances or person-centered excellence accreditation. So each of the types of accreditation builds upon our core manuals and materials.
So Nate, we keep talking about all these tools that maybe we should explain. So the basic assurances is kind of our organizational assessment tool. And so if you build your policies and procedures around all the factors that we outline in there, then you'd have a quality management system that would be able to help you really provide quality services. We talk a lot about the personal outcome measures, or the POM, which is a discovery tool that we use to talk to people receiving supports about what's truly important to them. And then we talk to somebody who knows them well, whether that's the DSP or somebody who knows them and their services well, to see, do you know how they define this outcome for themselves, and how are you supporting them to achieve it? So
Okay, yeah, no, I'm glad you clarified what those are. And again, someone that's not familiar, it'd be extremely helpful, right? To even know what the terms are. Do people or do organizations, I guess what I really mean, are they coming to you saying, "Hey, we think this would help our organization get better"? Is that like the main reason people come to you? Is it that there's some kind of, not that this is always a bad thing, but some kind of outside pressure of like, "Oh, our state has now said we need to, you know, get accredited," and that, they're choosing between a couple different accrediting bodies? Or I guess what's the driver of people finding you guys or coming to you?
So some states require accreditation, and you can choose from a variety of accrediting bodies. And some states, they go through their MCO, and the MCO will list whichever ones they recognize. So, we're recognized in some states and others we're not. So the organization has to basically just make sure that whoever their funders or regulators are, that they recognize our accreditation. There are some states that are now wanting to see that systems accreditation, so making sure that they're setting up organizations for success before they start supporting people, which we think is great to kind of get all your ducks in a row. But I'd say mostly people come to us just by word of mouth, that they either have to be accredited or they want to be accredited, and they hear about us from another provider that they know that had a surprisingly good experience, given that we were coming in to do an accreditation.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, but that speaks volumes. I mean, it really does speak volumes. There's nothing that's better than word of mouth referral, in my mind, anyway. Wow, talk about a whole new way of looking at accreditation. My mind is really going right now, and I hope yours is too. Now, I try to leave you with an action move at the end of every episode, and this is my one for you today. I want you to find one thing that your organization is doing quite well. Not something you're surviving, but something where you see thriving happening. And name it out loud to your team. Actually say it out loud explicitly, like in a team meeting, in a hallway conversation, or even in an email. And this is something that they referenced as appreciative inquiry. And the idea is really simple. You can't build on something that you never acknowledge. A lot of times in our field, we can be so focused on the gap, on what hasn't happened yet, or where there's a problem, or the number of incidents that went up over the last quarter, or whatever it is. And not that that's always bad, but sometimes we miss the strength that's right there in front of us, and then it's harder to build on it. So give it a shot. Stop for 60 seconds. Name that one thing. See what it does to the room you're in. Now, if today's conversation made you curious about CQL accreditation and what that process might look like for your organization, in the show notes you can find info, and I encourage you to reach out to them and learn more. Part 2 is coming up next time the episodes drop in a week from now. And that's where we're going to get into workforce data, what high retention organizations do differently, and a couple stories from personal outcome measures process that I think you'll really enjoy. One last thing, if you want a free download that essentially communicates to you how supervisors can level up their role as retention ambassadors instead of kind of accidentally pushing people out the door, I've got it for you. Just go to iddleader.com/burnout, and I think you'll enjoy it. All right. Well, until next time, here's to you. Keep up the amazing work.